Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Coming up on the program, Colin Anderson joins us from the Washington Free Beacon and exposes the smoke, mirrors, and tyrannical government officials behind pushing electric vehicles on everyone. An amazing story, and some amazing audio coming up with that as well. And then Nikki Neely joins us at 5 o'clock from Parents Defending Education. She testified today before the United States Senate. The left trying to defend pornography in schools, parents having none of it. We'll discuss that and so much more on a busy news day. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Here's Kevin McCarthy a little bit earlier today.
I am directing our House committee to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. This logical next step will give our committees the full power to gather all the facts and answers for the American public. It's exactly what we want to know, the answers. I believe the president would want to answer these questions and allegations as well.
Here with reaction is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She represents Georgia's 14th Congressional District. She's also a member of the House Oversight Committee, which will be essential to this impeachment inquiry process. Congresswoman, good to have you with us.
Hi, thanks for having me on today.
What changes now that Speaker McCarthy has made this announcement?
Well, what changes is we have the full power of the House of Representatives behind our investigation into Joe Biden. And this will bring so much more power behind our subpoenas. They cannot be stalled anymore, and we will be able to get really to the bottom of the corruption that's happened as Joe Biden has held the highest seats of power in the land.
Now, I noticed I saw Speaker McCarthy made a great case today, I thought, for why an impeachment inquiry is important to bring. Talked about the extensive evidence against the Biden family. I have noticed, though, that many in the media are saying that there is no evidence, or sometimes they use the phrase direct evidence, implicating Joe Biden in Hunter Biden's business dealings. When you hear that, what do you think?
It makes me laugh because there was never any evidence against President Trump, but yet the same media members ran around parroting all the talking points of the Democrats and basically acting like the campaign arm and policy arm and the political arm for the Democrat Party. No, the real truth is we have plenty of evidence that implicate Joe Biden. We have evidence that proves that Joe Biden has lied to the American people, and that's why this impeachment inquiry is so important, because we have a lot more evidence to produce. And more importantly, this investigation, this inquiry is not only into Joe Biden as president of the United States, as former vice president, and maybe even former senator. This investigation is to uncover all of the unelected bureaucrats that get paid with taxpayer-funded paychecks that have covered up Joe Biden's crimes, propelling him to the highest seat of power in our country. And I believe the American people deserve that list of names.
An example of what you're talking about is the revelation recently, I think revealed by your committee, that the Secret Service was prepared to share information with House Republicans about the extent to which they interfered in the investigation into Hunter Biden, may have tipped him and his legal representatives off to any investigative activities, and that the Department of Homeland Security intercepted it and stopped it from getting to Congress. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And there's many more than that. Look at the 51 intelligence community members that signed their name to a lie, saying that the Hunter Biden laptop wasn't even real and that it was nothing but Russian disinformation. That's a list of 51 people right there we should be investigating. We also have David Weiss, who is the counsel for the special counsel investigating Hunter Biden. But yet David Weiss was the one that orchestrated the sweetheart deal that was going to get Hunter Biden off and protect him and prevent him from being charged with very serious crimes that he's guilty of. And the IRS whistleblowers gave us all of that information. There is a list of people on and on and on that have covered up Joe Biden's crimes. And these are the people that we also need to be investigating and talking to as we investigate Joe Biden.
Let me go back to what we started with, which is what changes here. You mentioned that the House now will have additional powers to be able to break through any sort of legal speed bumps that the administration may try and throw in your way. I noticed that Speaker McCarthy didn't do this by way of a floor vote. He announced that we see basically a super committee come together in the form of an impeachment inquiry. Would a floor vote add any extra heft to this?
No, that's a really interesting thing about it, and that was one of my questions as well. You see, Nancy Pelosi herself set the precedent that the Speaker of the House does not have to hold a floor vote to launch an impeachment inquiry. The Speaker of the House only has to announce and organize the impeachment inquiry. That is what Kevin McCarthy did, and the Democrats and the White House and Joe Biden can thank Nancy Pelosi for making it all possible.
I noticed also today that Congressman Matt Gaetz down in Florida, I believe he does want to vote on an impeachment inquiry, but one of the things he says that he's concerned about with Speaker McCarthy is that September 30th is a deadline on a bunch of these clean spending bills that Speaker McCarthy had pledged to pass. So essentially 12 individual clean spending bills being passed by September 30th. Congressman Gaetz says it's not even possible for this to be done in time. Are you concerned about that, the spending bills?
Well, Matt is a dear friend of mine, and he's one of my best allies in the House, one of my good friends and colleagues, and we see eye to eye on many things, especially getting behind President Trump and getting him reelected in 2024. But I am dismayed at what I'm hearing from him today. Why would he demand a floor vote for an impeachment inquiry when that is the very thing that I have been fighting for since Joe Biden's first day of office? I introduced articles of impeachment against Joe Biden, and him wanting a floor vote before there's an impeachment inquiry stalls the very thing that he himself has been demanding along with me. The other big problem here is I agree with him on those policies, things that we want to get passed, like term limits and a balanced budget. I'm a co-sponsor for those bills. But my question to Matt is, how in the world do we accomplish those conservative Republican agenda items when he vacates the chair of our Republican speaker by working with Democrats to get that done? I want to see the plan laid out where he intends to elect a speaker that can accomplish these things after we've only held the majority for just over 8 months. None of this makes sense to me. We have to proceed forward with the impeachment inquiry that Kevin McCarthy announced today, and thank God he announced it. And we have to work hard for the rest of the month, no matter how long it takes, trying to get our appropriation bills passed and making sure that there's no funding for Ukraine, no funding for COVID insanity, masks and vaccines, no funding for Jack Smith's special counsel and a weaponized government, and prioritizing our border and our security for our country. Those are the things that matter, and those are the things we need to be working on, not trying to vacate the chair and go in 15 rounds for a speaker's race again that would stall every single ounce of that and stop the very impeachment inquiry that I have been demanding and that America wants to see happen.
So in other words, in so many words, you do have confidence in Speaker McCarthy that he is going to both attend to an impeachment inquiry here in an honest and sincere way, and also keep his pledge on getting these spending bills passed in an orderly fashion, as he agreed to when he became Speaker.
I hope he can do that, and I do have faith in him on the impeachment inquiry. But America also needs to understand how appropriation bills get passed. It's not Kevin McCarthy running around with every appropriation bill trying to get it done. We have committees set up that have to get these bills out of their committee. Two of these bills are still sitting in committee. That's not Kevin McCarthy's fault. That's the committee needing to finish their work. Also, we have a whip team. We have other leaders in leadership that help push these bills to the floor and help get the votes for the bills. So people need to understand that Congress is run by the majority party, and that takes a team of people making it happen. And that's how it's always been done. So what we have to do until September 30th is we got to work it. We got to bust our tails like the American people do every day in their jobs. And we need to try to get these things passed, and I hope we can get it done.
Okay, and then lastly, on impeachment, as this moves along, when should we see some action here? Obviously, he made this announcement today. What does this look like in practice? Is Jason Smith, James Comer, Jim Jordan take the lead here? When did things start moving, and how much do you need to see before you move to actual impeachment?
Well, now that's a great question, because there's a difference between impeachment inquiry and then an actual vote on articles of impeachment. So that's the two different things. Today, Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, launched the inquiry, and he has assigned 3 committees to handle the entire inquiry. I'm very excited to see that process get started. But I want everyone to understand this is not going to be a fast process, because there's 2 things that need to happen. We don't need to rush to impeach Joe Biden. We already know that he's guilty. We also need to investigate much further deep into the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA, or any federal agency to uncover any unelected bureaucrat that has participated, has been involved in the giant conspiracy and cover-up of Joe Biden's crimes. I think the American people definitely want to know their names. I want to know their names, because when we take back the White House in 2024, I want to hold those people accountable. I want them to not only be fired, but I want them to be prosecuted by our Department of Justice if their actions reach that level of need to prosecute.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene joining us today with live reaction to Speaker McCarthy's announcement that there will be now an impeachment inquiry officially into President Joe Biden. Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Good to have you today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Always nice to talk to you. You know, on this announcement from McCarthy today, he laid out in brief some of the evidence that he says justifies this impeachment inquiry. Here he is.
Taken together, these allegations paint a picture of a culture of corruption. Now, here's what we know so far. Through our investigations, we have found that President Biden did lie to the American people about his own knowledge of his family's foreign business dealings. Eyewitnesses have testified that the president joined on multiple phone calls and had multiple interactions. Dinners resulted in cars and millions of dollars.
You know, if you're a member of the media and you've kind of bought into this line that there is no evidence of Joe Biden's complicity here, how do you explain his routine lying on this subject? How do you just cast that aside and say, well, whatever, it doesn't matter? What, he was mistaken every time? No, I didn't discuss my son's business dealings. Now we have endless evidence that he was on phone calls with his son and business partners. He was at dinners with his son and business partners. The purpose of that was to enrich his family. That's not even up for debate. That's not up for debate at all. He was involved, according to Tony Bobulinski, in 1,000%. He is the big guy, cut in on 10% for the big guy in an arrangement with a Chinese energy company. You have an FD 1023 form from a trusted FBI source alleging that Joe Biden was recorded on 2 separate occasions discussing bribes with the head of Burisma. Bribes. That is, the Biden family would do something for the head of Burisma in return for a lot of money. What was that thing? Well, it certainly looks like it was getting Victor Shokin fired. That's what it said in the FD 1023 form. Hunter Biden had 15 conversations to that effect. Hunter Biden's text messages and laptop data reveal that he complained at length on multiple occasions that he was paying all the family's expenses, that he had to give his income to dad. What more evidence do you need? Suspicious activity reports out the wazoo. Every bank account that they've ever had flagged by the Treasury Department for suspicious activity. Banks so concerned about the flow of the money that they were contacting the government. Shell corporations to move money. Massive payments broken up into dozens of smaller payments distributed among the Biden family. What more evidence do you need? The evidence is everywhere. Devin Archer, in addition to Tony Bobulinski, saying that Hunter Biden put the Ukrainians on the phone with Joe Biden. He did it in congressional testimony. His lawyer made him walk it back. He's like, D.C., with D.C., he says. He later acknowledged, chuckling to Tucker Carlson in an extensive interview, yeah, that's what was happening here. They were selling access to Joe. And then anybody who says that they weren't doesn't know what they're talking about or is lying. Devin Archer said that. What more evidence do you need? And McCarthy didn't even lay it all out today. He just gave the basics.
Sons and his son's business partners. We know that bank records show that nearly $20 million in payments were directed to the Biden family members and associates through various shell companies. The Treasury Department alone.
Yeah, why all the deceit? Fundamentally, if you're working with someone, if you're assessing someone, if you're trying to figure out how much integrity they have, if you see a history of endless deceit, doesn't that throw up a million red flags? Why would you have to smuggle a bunch of money, split it up into all small payments, and bring it through a bunch of different shell companies? Why would you have to do that? Why would you lie on a routine basis about your knowledge of your son's business dealings? The deceit gives away the whole game, doesn't it?
It has more than 150 transactions involving the Biden family and other business associates that were flagged as suspicious activity by U.S. banks.
All right. Let's check in on traffic now. We've got a lot of breaking news to get to. 323, Ed Rodriguez in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
Well, hey, Vince, we have got a problem that we're not really sure what's going on. Northbound on 395, traffic has come to a real crawl at Washington Boulevard across the 14th Street Bridge, and then on the Southeast Freeway all the way over to the Navy Yard, but we haven't found any specific problem at the Navy Yard. The Southwest Freeway is stop and go from the 3rd Street Tunnel just down to the 14th Street Bridge. Now from GarageDoorRepair.com, here's the WMAL ABC 7 Storm Watch forecast.
Tracking a mix of sun and clouds and temperatures in the mid, maybe even some upper 80s through the afternoon. A dry day and a bit humid as well. Still have that summer-like feel. Now into the evening, after dark, some showers could work their way into the metro area. Some off and on showers overnight, lows in the 60s. You'll see those showers lingering into your Wednesday, off and on, particularly through the first half of the day. Highs only in the upper 70s. Cooler, drier weather by the end of the week. Lows in the 50s at night downtown and upper 70s for highs. Thursday and Friday looking gorgeous. I'm 7 News meteorologist Brian Vandegraff in the First Alert Weather Center.
Right now in the nation's capital, 85 degrees, 324 here on Newstalk 105.9 WMAL. Let's see. John Fetterman is somehow a United States Senator wandering around the hills hallways today. And he was wearing gym shorts and a sloppy button-down shirt. And a reporter asked him what he thought about the impeachment inquiry. He had a staffer standing next to him holding a little phone to turn the question into text as it was being spoken out. And then the staffer is holding him by the hand. It's all very weird. Here's John Fetterman being asked about impeachment.
I ask you about this news that Speaker McCarthy has formally launched an impeachment or has said he's going to.
Oh my God, really? Oh my gosh, it's devastating. Ooh, don't do it. Please don't do it. Oh no.
We gotta run back to the office. But,
He grabs the guy's hand, drags him off. Right this way, Senator. Your snack pack awaits. Yeah, the guy's out of control. Hey, coming up on the Vince Coglianese Show, we've got the CIA's COVID cover-up, brand new information on that. And, of course, a Democrat had not only selling out her country, this time selling her body online, caught doing that, and now attacking Republicans for noticing. It's all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up today, Colin Anderson joins us from the Washington Free Beacon as Biden administration officials try and pretend that their electric vehicles actually work, and it's hilarious. It's just like, honestly, it's an episode of Seinfeld. We're going to talk about that coming up. And then at 5 o'clock, Nikki Neely is going to join us from Parents Defending Education. She testified before the United States Senate today in what turned into a very explicit Senate hearing where some lawmakers read out loud the books that some schools are putting in front of the children. And it made everybody uncomfortable. Insane. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. First, let me get into the CIA breaking news today that the CIA tried to bury the Wuhan lab leak information and was paying off analysts to keep the information secret. Those are the findings today of a House committee conveying, this is the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. They're conveying this information to the CIA now because they learned it from a whistleblower. The New York Post reporting the Central Intelligence Agency offered to pay off analysts in order to bury their findings that COVID-19 most likely leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. New whistleblower testimony to Congress alleges. A senior-level CIA officer told House committee leaders that his agency tried to pay off 6 analysts who found SARS-CoV-2 likely originated in a Wuhan lab if they changed their position and said the virus jumped from animals to humans. According to a letter sent Tuesday, that's today, to CIA Director William Burns. Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic Chairman Brad Wenstrup and Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Mike Turner requested all documents, communications, and pay information from the CIA's COVID discovery team by September 26th. Quote, according to the whistleblower, at the end of its review, 6 of the 7 members of the team believed the intelligence and science were sufficient to make a low-confidence assessment that COVID-19 originated from a laboratory in Wuhan, China, the House panel chairman wrote. The 7th member of the team, who also happened to be the most senior, was the lone officer to believe that COVID-19 originated through zoonosis, or in other words, from an animal to a human. The whistleblower further contends that to come to the eventual public determination of uncertainty, the other 6 members were given a significant monetary incentive to change their position. Is that how it works at the CIA? Do you get bribed into taking a position? Is that how it's supposed to work? I thought you just got a government paycheck. I thought that's how this went. They can give you extra money and you will ignore evidence and come to the conclusion that they tell you to? Is that how it works? The analysts were, quote, experienced officers with significant scientific expertise. Wenstrup and Turner also asked for documents and communications between the CIA and other federal agencies, including the State Department, the FBI, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Energy Department. You know, why would the CIA have an extensive inquiry into this? What would be the incentives for lying to the public, accepting money to tell lies? Is it possible that this was an American-funded bioweapons program in China, and we were trying to cover up all of the evidence of that? Or that American funding may have accidentally been going to a Chinese bioweapons program, and the government was embarrassed about that detail and was trying to suppress that information from getting out? We know that the lab in Wuhan was accepting and was being controlled in no small part by the Chinese military. So, yeah, there are deep concerns here about all of this. And so the whistleblower, apparently important and credible enough for members of Congress to demand more information from the CIA, a senior official has come forward to say, yeah, they paid off 6 analysts to change their position, that they had some confidence that this came from the lab in Wuhan. In a separate letter, the House committee leaders identified former CIA Chief Operating Officer Andrew McCreadis as having played a central role in the COVID investigation. They have now asked him to sit for a transcribed interview. In response to this, CIA Director of Public Affairs, a glorified press person, that's what that means, Tammy Kupperman-Thorpe, said, quote, at CIA, we are committed to the highest standards of analytic rigor, integrity, objectivity, and lying all the time. I'm sorry, it doesn't say that part. It doesn't say lying all the time. But that is actually fundamentally what they're supposed to do. But they're supposed to do it against enemies of the United States, not the American people. The job of the CIA is to deceive our enemies, to infiltrate our adversaries, to collect intelligence that's of use to the American people. Have you noticed how frequently the tools of the spy state, of the security state, are turned against America's own people? And if this whistleblower is telling the truth, we have yet again more evidence of that happening now. The press person says, we do not pay analysts to reach specific conclusions. We take these allegations extremely seriously and are looking into them. We will keep our congressional oversight committees appropriately informed. Appropriately informed. That's an important caveat. Appropriately informed. Whatever we feel like telling you, we'll tell you. And whatever we don't, we won't. I should remind you that the CIA was involved in spying on the United States Senate and lied about it under John Brennan. They straight up were spying on Senate committees. I believe the issue at hand was they were concerned about their funding. They were spying on the Senate. And then when Brennan was asked about it, he was like, no, that's not happening. It was happening. He lied. He lied about it. Of course, now he's treated as the burning bush. He's a font of wisdom and truth and honesty. The FBI was the first U.S. intelligence agency, the New York Post says, to conclude that the COVID-19 pandemic most likely originated with a lab leak. In February, the Energy Department also concluded a lab leak was likely based on new intelligence. The U.S. intelligence community declassified its 10-page report on COVID origins in June, which found biosafety concerns and genetic engineering were taking place at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But most of its agencies assessed that SARS-CoV-2 was not genetically engineered. By the way, there's also some sleight of hand in how they describe things like this. There's a since very early on, when we were learning, for those of us who were paying attention, about what was going on at Wuhan, there's a massive, they use a lot of semantic games with you. This is the same thing with Dr. Fauci, where he's like, well, that's not technically gain-of-function research. Okay, let me just be more simple. Are you making the viruses more infectious and more dangerous? Yes or no? I didn't ask you to say whether or not it's gain-of-function. More infectious, more dangerous, yes or no? And the answer to that is yes, a resounding yes. That is the activity of that lab. They're increasing the lethality and infectivity of the viruses there. And he's like, well, it's not gain of function. Trying to cover up his own butt, cover his own job. And they do the same stuff with, it's not genetically engineered. Like, they didn't use hand tools to go in and splice the virus up and then recreate it. And they didn't raise it on a platform up into thunder and have lightning strike it like, Frankenstein's monster or anything. No, what they did was something that they call serial passaging, where they take mice, like freak mice that they've genetically altered to have humanized lungs. The mice have human lungs because they build these things in a lab, and then they try and get the virus over and over and over and over and over again, thousands upon thousands of times to infect the mouse. And when they have some success, they try it again and again and again and again, and they make it worse and worse and worse. And what they do is they accelerate a natural evolution process inside of a lab. It's called passaging. So even the whole, it wasn't genetically engineered. These are word games that they're playing with you. Designed to conceal how demented this all was. Still doing it, by the way. Still doing it. Spending all this money on foreign labs. If this is so important to the United States, why are we doing it in Wuhan, China? Why are we hiding U.S. funding in a lab in Wuhan? Several scientists at the Wuhan lab also became sick in the fall of 2019 with symptoms consistent with, but not diagnostic of, COVID-19, the report states. The CIA and one other intelligence agency, quote, remain unable to determine the precise origin of the COVID-19 pandemic, as both hypotheses rely on significant assumptions or face challenges with conflicting reporting. All right, so the agency whose primary job is to be able to tell Americans what is happening in other countries, right? The CIA, that's their job. If there's any agency that has that job, they're the ones who say, we just don't know. We just have no idea. We can't express any degree of confidence about anything. We're just completely in the dark on this subject. Okay, really? How did the Energy Department arrive at some confidence that this came from the Wuhan lab? How did the FBI, the domestic law enforcement agency, come to that conclusion? And the CIA still sitting back there going, it's really a coin toss. It's anybody's guess. We have no idea. We have no idea. Well, it turns out they're probably lying. That's the answer to this question. They're just probably lying about it because they're covering up some interest here. They're using their deception on the American people. And so now you have a whistleblower telling Congress, in fact, 6 analysts were paid off to come to a different conclusion than the one they actually came up with. And by the way, they are all extraordinary and talented scientists. They all looked at this and they said, it sure looks like it came from the lab. And they were paid to change the outcome of their assessment. Man, John Ratcliffe is the former director of national intelligence. He told Congress in April that the lab leak was, quote, the only credible explanation for the pandemic. Quote, my informed assessment as a person with as much access as anyone to our government's intelligence has been and continues to be that a lab leak is the only explanation credibly supported by our intelligence, by science, and by, most importantly, common sense. Common sense. This is such an obvious point that even Jon Stewart can recognize it. He goes on national television. It says, something to the effect of, didn't he steal this from somebody? Did he steal it from Chris Plant? Somebody had come up with this analogy originally, and then almost positive it's a Chris Plantism. And Jon Stewart goes on television and says, well, if there was an outbreak of chocolatey goodness in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where might you think it came from? Yeah, Hershey, the chocolate plant. Exactly. There's an outbreak of a deadly bat coronavirus in Wuhan, China, which happens to contain the leading bat coronavirus lab on the planet. Yeah, that seems like a likely suspect, right? If our intelligence, Ratcliffe said this to the House, if our intelligence and evidence supporting a lab leak was, this is a former Texas Republican congressman who served as, it's John Ratcliffe. I'm getting myself confused. It's Ratcliffe. Just looking ahead in the story and trying to make this make sense. If our intelligence and evidence supporting a lab leak was placed side by side with our intelligence and evidence pointing to a natural origins or spillover theory, the lab leak side of the ledger would be long, convincing, even overwhelming, while the spillover side would be nearly empty and tenuous. Yeah, one of the reasons why the spillover side is empty and tenuous is because they never found the intermediary animal that would be necessary. They never even identified what it was. There's been words like, oh, maybe it was a pangolin. And pangolins are cool-looking creatures, by the way, if you ever want to look at a cool animal. You're like, man, God made some awesome animals. He made a pangolin. You should see this thing. But they haven't found any evidence of what the intermediary species would be for natural transmission. So everybody with two brain cells to rub together and two eyes and two ears and the ability to even process any of this has said, obviously it came from Wuhan. It came from the lab. And so now the CIA, which specializes in duplicity, is using it against the United States of America, is using it against her own citizens. And in case the House Republicans are looking for anything to defund right now, why don't you start targeting these agencies, these bureaucrats, these places that aren't serving the American people? They're trying to lord over us and to deceive us and to use our blood, sweat, and treasure for the pursuit of very demented goals. Why are we making Frankenstein viruses in Wuhan? What is that about? I've been answering some questions. How about remembering your place in this hierarchy? That you work for the American people and not the other way around. We're just minutes away from talking about this Democrat running for the House of Delegates in Virginia, who is an oversharer. She has posted all sorts of, just porn. She's posted porn everywhere, and now people have noticed. I guess that's what happens when you run for political office. People say, who is this woman? Oh my God. I know more about her than I wanted to. We'll be getting into the details of that coming up at the top of the hour. I have a reminder for you from yesterday. Joe Biden, who just had, I think we're safe to say, he had the single worst 9/11 commemoration ceremony that any president has ever had. Am I safe in saying that? It must be. 22 years in, we've reached the low, and that was Joe Biden yesterday. And for a number of reasons, Biden used the 9/11 event in Alaska yesterday, of all places, to accuse Americans of a rising tide of hatred. So that was fun. He claimed he visited Ground Zero on September 12th of 2001. That was a lie. Here he is yesterday, just making it up again.
Never forget. Never forget. We never forget. Each of us, each of those precious lives stolen too soon when evil attacked. Ground Zero in New York. And I remember standing there the next day and looking at the building. I felt like I was looking through the gates of hell. It looked so devastating because from where you could stand.
He just made that up. He didn't go there the next day. In fact, when the White House was asked about this, they couldn't even offer up a defense. The Daily Caller asked for more information about this. When was he there? Because there is plenty of footage of him from September 12, 2001, giving a speech on the Senate floor. Then he was on television from Washington that night. He was not in New York. They say that he did end up visiting finally on September 20th of that month, which you would expect a sitting member of the United States Senate to go and visit the site of the attack. He eventually did, September 20th, but he didn't go the next day. He just makes this stuff up. The other piece of this, and I mentioned it yesterday, Biden had just days prior to this commemoration in Alaska met with the Saudis. He met with the head of the Saudi government. He was talking to them. He was, yucking it up, shaking hands. This after previously claiming that the Saudis were pariahs. 15 of the 19 hijackers, not to mention Osama bin Laden himself, all Saudis. All Saudis. The 9/11 families noticed this. So what the heck is he doing? So, yeah, I would say. And then, of course, who could forget the $6 billion in cash that he sent to the Iranians yesterday? A banner day for a U.S. president commemorating 9/11. Coming up, a Democrat who would like to become a lawmaker, bearing it all.